It just came like 10 minutes, like less than 10 minutes ago.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Can you see it, Chelsea?
Let's see. I was on the YouTube channel. Let me see. Oh, yes, I can. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Congratulations. You're a published author.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Very.
Awesome. Yep.
Well, so we've given folks about a minute to come in, and I know people are still streaming in, but I also know that we only have an hour and we want to get to all the good stuff. So hello and welcome. I'm Chelsea Lake. I'm a member of the events team at Politics and Prose Bookstore, and I'd like to welcome you to PMP Live. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. At any point during the event, you can click on the link that I'll be dropping in the chat momentarily to purchase I Can Take It From Here by Lisa Forbes. You can ask a question by clicking on the Q&A. The Q&A can be found along the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to everyone's questions, but I apologize in advance if we don't have time to address yours. We are delighted to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To access those captions, all you need to do is click on the live transcripts option, which is also along the bottom of your screen. And now, onto our event. I Can Take It From Here recounts Lisa Forbes' harrowing journey into darkness, including a 14-year-long stint in a maximum security prison and her fierce resolve to understand the effects of the trauma she endured, to take personal responsibility for her actions, and to ensure that her history does not dictate her destiny. Forbes grew up poor on the south side of Chicago. An ex-con in her 30s, she started her own company, Lisa Forbes, Inc., to help restored citizens cope with post-prison life. Based in Denver, she has spoken widely and conducted many workshops. Previously, the state communications director for the League of Women Voters of Colorado, Forbes now edits her local county league's monthly newsletter, The Voter. Additionally, Forbes is a Colorado core coordinator of Better Angels, a national citizens movement to bring liberals and conservatives together at the grassroots level. This evening, Forbes will be in conversation with Joe Mitchell. Mitchell is a success coach, motivational speaker, and trainer. And now it is my pleasure to turn the screen over to you, and I will see you at the end of the event. Have a great event.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. My name is Joe Mitchell, and I am pleased to be the moderator for this great conversation with Lisa, who has just published her book today. And if you look over here on the side of me, you can see I have just gotten the book today, and it is wonderful. And I hope that you will order it if you like to. I think it's going to be in the chat. The instructions will be in the chat. But today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the book and talk about Lisa a little bit. And Lisa is someone who has a very interesting history. And we'll get into that. But I wanted to first ask you, Lisa, what motivated you? Like, what was the message that you wanted to convey in writing this book? So first of all, can you just, people can't see the name of it, and I'd like you to say the name of it and maybe tell us a little bit about the book and why you wrote it.
Okay. I wrote I Can Take It From Here. That's the name of the book. And that title is not just the title of the book. It's really my personal affirmation statement. It's the statement I wanted to make about myself. And secondly, it's the statement I wanted to make for other people, that other people would be able to also say, I can take it from here, is the vision that I hold for them. And so I wrote the book because I wanted to give people not just hope, but to give them a pathway, the pathway that I walked to be able to get to the point where I felt like I could embody what that title meant to me.
Great. Now, when you say you say people, who did you write this book for?
When I wrote the book, I specifically wrote it for two groups, but then it sort of expanded to a third. I wrote this book, first of all, for people like myself, people who have been incarcerated and who are now out and trying to recreate their lives, people who I call restored citizens. And that title is very meaningful to me because I took it from a scripture in the Bible where it says that God would restore to you the years that the locust and the cankerworm had eaten up. When I read that book, I read the Bible in prison, and when I read that scripture, I claimed that. I said, I want my years back. I want those years that I feel had been devoured. And so I wrote this book for restored citizens who would be able to see someone like themselves or someone who people might consider even worse than themselves and feel like, wow, if she could do that and I could do what she did to get to where she was, I feel like I could get to the same place. The second group I wrote it for was for people who were trying to help restored citizens, because I really did not want to just be preaching to the choir. I wanted to talk to people who maybe would resist some of the things that I was suggesting, would have a different opinion. People who said, well, I already help restored citizens. And that's why I was so pleased to have the endorsement of this book from Johnny Taylor, the president and CEO of the Society for Human Resource Management. Because he said that he had long been a proponent of second chance initiatives, but my book made him rethink what might be the best way to approach it. So that was a perfect honor for me, an example of who I wanted to reach, people who are decision makers, people in HR who might want to say, wow, we want to help people coming back, but what's the best way to do it? Yeah. And then finally, as I wrote the book and started getting feedback from people, I realized that, trauma is trauma. And people are in prison, not behind wires or bars. People are in prison in their homes. People are in prison in their relationships. So then I wanted to write the book in a way that people would see themselves, whatever their type of trauma was. I'm talking about trauma resolution and how it needs to be an integral part of how we go forward.
Yeah. So that's a good place to kind of dig in a little bit. And what kind of trauma did you experience? I mean, a lot of times people get traumatized early in life, like as kids. Is that something that happened for you?
And I did have a lot of childhood abuse. I had sexual abuse, emotional abuse, religious abuse that I outline in the book. One thing that an idea of how I wanted to say, it doesn't have to necessarily be something that terrible that a person might think of, is that when I was 4, I got hit by a car. And so, trauma, the thing about trauma is that it shapes your identity. Yeah. It makes you different after you experience it. And so when I got hit by a car, the aftermath of that was that I got blamed for it. And I was only 4. And the conclusion that I drew was that I was a bad person and that was the reason that bad things happened to me. Also, that I was not safe and that nobody was going to defend me. So as I grew up and began to have other bad experiences, like being sexually molested, I didn't feel like anybody would care enough. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't feel like anybody was going to protect me anyway. And so it just developed into a personality of years of just stuffing pain and anger. So that's just, one example of the many that I detail. But another example is when I was, I guess, about 10, a woman who was a friend of my mother's got murdered. And I heard someone say that she had been stabbed in the throat. And for years after that, even as when I was an adult practically, whenever I had to lean my head back, say over a shampoo bowl or get my head done, I would instinctively cover my throat.
Wow.
It just got lodged in me somehow. So there's all different kinds of trauma. It doesn't have to be all that I experienced, but I definitely did experience a significant amount of it in childhood.
Yeah. So this brings up the next question, which is the big one, is that we discussed earlier that you had been incarcerated for 14 years. What were you incarcerated for, and what happened?
Well, you know, you and I have talked before, and I have to say that this question never gets any easier for me to answer. Every time someone asks me, you would think it would just kind of roll off my tongue by now, but it doesn't, and maybe it never should. So I want to start with saying that, my charge was homicide, first-degree murder. And I absolutely take full responsibility for my crime. In my book, I posit that you can't move forward if you're lying to yourself about yourself. So I take full responsibility for killing an unarmed man. The person that I killed was my daughter's father when she was 2 years old. And, I can't really tell this story. I can tell you what happened, but I can't tell this story and make it make sense. And I don't tell it in the book as a means of justification. I just tell you what happened, and then I can answer any questions about it. But there's no way to make it defensible. So I was 19, and I had moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to be near my aunts, because I was just trying to get out of Chicago and kind of get a fresh start on my own. And I wasn't even supposed to be at James's house that day. That's my daughter's father's name. I had taken the Greyhound bus that morning from Milwaukee and was planning to surprise my parents and let them visit with Mercedes. That's my daughter's name. But when I got there, they weren't home. My parents are Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were at the Kingdom Hall. And I didn't think about that before I went there. So, but James lived near them. So I decided to go to his house and wait for them to come. Yeah. When I rang his doorbell, somebody peeked out from behind the curtains and then closed them back. And it didn't look like him. Right. And I said to myself, even if it was just me standing out there, okay, he might say, go away. But I really didn't think that James would see Mercedes standing out there. It was December in Chicago, and she was 2, and not let us in. And my conclusion was something has got to be very wrong in that house. Yeah. And then I experienced, Joe, really what I can only describe as an irresistible impulse to get in that house. And ironically, in my mind, my motive was to get in there and make sure that James was okay. Yeah. And that really is the incongruous part of this whole thing, because I then went to the store a couple of blocks from his house and bought a knife. And I bought it because I thought something might be happening to him. Yeah. And that once I got in the house, I might have to defend him and myself from whoever it was peeking in the house, peeking out of the window. Sure. As nutty as that sounds, that is really what was on my mind. Right. But when I got inside and realized what was really happening, that he was in there with other people, he had just gotten married. I didn't know any of this. And it made me feel so humiliated. Yeah. And so stupid, really, for thinking that, he might need me to help him. That what happened, Joe, to answer your question of what happened, is that just triggered a lifetime of memories for me. a lifetime of being treated in the same way by other people like that. And I just completely lost it. You know, it felt almost like I was in a dream. It didn't feel real when I stabbed him. And I was in that same kind of dream-like state when I was trying to get out of the house. So, you know, like I said, there isn't any way to explain this crime in a way that makes it defensible. And I always say that if I had been on my jury, I would have convicted me too.
Yeah.
But I tell people, you know, that is what happened and that is what I did. I was 19 at the time, and it was the end result of a constant drumbeat throughout my entire life of not mattering.
Yeah.
So that was the emotional state that I was in. And when that happened, essentially what happened was I projected a lifetime of memories onto a single person in that moment and punished him for everybody.
The trauma can cause us to do crazy, crazy stuff. So what? But I'm really wondering. I mean, this is a question that I've always wondered. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I am, or I have been for 20 years, a criminal attorney. Okay, I'm an attorney, and I represent people, and some of them go to prison, but I have no idea what it's like to actually be in prison. So what was it like to be in prison for you for 14 years?
Mm-hmm. Well, the experience varied over time because I was 19 when I went in and 33 when I came out. So I did a lot of growing up in many ways. But one way that I really grew up and changed was that the prison library became my best friend. I had not had the opportunity to go to college. So in the prison, they offered classes, college level classes. And I took every class I could take. I got every degree they offered. I read almost every book in the library. The correctional officers used to describe me as the person who has more books in her cell than in the library. Yeah. Because reading was really my escape, but it was also the only way that I knew that I could transform myself. And I could really see the advantage that reading had over me because unfortunately I was surrounded by people, many of whom could not read. And wow. I really understood what a salvation reading was for me. I read everything from the complete works of William Shakespeare to Mark Twain to Revolutionary Suicide by Huey Newton. You know, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And believe it or not, Mein Kampf by Hitler was on the shelf in the library. Wow. And I read it. So anything I could get my hands on, I read. And what drove me to do that was that it was my way of maintaining a sense of identity. You know, I was determined to not become what my rap sheet said I was. I was determined to stay in control of who I could be. I couldn't change what I did, but I didn't want who I did to be who I was.
Yes.
And I didn't want my past to be my future. And I didn't want what labels had been given to me, convict, you know, or number N77122. I didn't want that to be my identity. And I knew that if I could just get enough in my mind to transform myself and find a foundation to recreate my life on, that was the only hope I had for you getting out of there and never coming back.
Yeah.
So I mean, that
so did you get degrees and certificates and stuff like that?
I did. That's where I earned my paralegal certificate, which is how I've earned my living for the 20 years since I've been out. And I got associate's degrees and certificates of completion and just anything I could take, associates of appliances. even if I wasn't necessarily interested in the class per se, like for a career, like commercial arts and photography, I took it because I was searching for who else I could be after the 14 years in here. If I had to be somebody other than what they were calling me.
Yeah.
And I was so hungry for anything. I took every class I could take.
That seems very unusual, though. I mean, do most of the inmates do that?
Well, a big thing about prisoners is there's a lot of illiteracy there. And so I did get certified as a reading and math tutor, as well as a tutor in English as a second language. So I tutored people, taught people to read, helped people get their GEDs. That was my contribution because I couldn't really imagine spending 14 years and not being able to read a book. And so when I saw that a lot of people were in that situation, I did a lot of volunteering to help other people not be in that situation.
Yeah. So when I was reading your book, one of the things that I noticed was that when you after you left prison, there was a big transformation that happened in you. Mm-hmm. Could you tell people like what happened and how that happened?
Well, it was a transformation that was long in the making. So, if you're looking at the cover of my book, you'll see these loops and spirals. And really, those loops and spirals represent the long and winding road that I took to get to the point where people could say, oh, you're doing well. People see that now. But when I first got out, I had grown up chronologically, and I had done a lot of growing mentally and educationally, but I hadn't done a whole lot of growing emotionally. And ironically, when I went to one of the places that in Chicago that help people get jobs when they get out of prison, the Savior Foundation, they told me, we can't help you because your release papers say that you need therapy before you can be on the job. Huh. To which I said, why didn't anybody give me therapy for the 14 years I've been sitting in the day room? So, but in fact, it was really true. I had not I had not recognized what was at play was trauma. Yeah. I had an intellectual understanding that I needed to change, but trauma is not an intellectual thing. And so, and for most people, crimes are not intellectual processes, not violent crimes anyway, So when I came out, I was still really emotionally in the traumatized state I was in when I went in. And what was evidence of that was I came home and basically immediately recreated my childhood. So after 14 years, I was out for 9 months before I married a man who was my father's age.
Wow.
And I'm the youngest of 6 children. And he had 5 older children who were basically like my 5 older siblings. And that was the way that they interacted with me. And he interacted with me in a way that triggered all of my childhood memories. I was right back almost to the tiniest detail in the same situation I had grown up in. And not only that, but I moved with him to Atlanta, to a suburb of Atlanta, in a setting where I was very isolated and really was more or less being controlled by him. So I got out after 14 years and put myself right back in prison and right back in my childhood home. And that was really the evidence that I was still chained to my past. It wasn't that I had read books. It wasn't that I could have intellectual conversations. It was that I was repeating the same life patterns. I was making the same decisions that had already led me to disaster. Yeah. So that marriage lasted 10 years because it took me 10 more years to realize I'm stuck in a pattern. Yeah. And then that was the point when I had that realization that was the point, Joe, that I was at where I could then be where you described, which is making some changes.
Yeah. Well, what kind of changes were the most powerful for you?
Well, one day I was working as a paralegal, and it was during the time when the bottom had dropped out of the commercial real estate market, and I got laid off. And so my ex-husband and I, my husband at the time, it was a really terrible marriage. And so I was either going to go stay with my aunt, or he was going to go stay with one of his daughters. So he went to stay with his daughter. And it was really the first time in all the time that I had been married that I had ever really just had some space to be alone and ask myself, what am I doing? How did I get right back in this situation? How can a person who has the appearance of being intelligent and smart and well-read and a paralegal and working, having it together seemingly, be such a disaster zone on the inside? And when I realized this is just a feedback loop, I went on the internet and started searching for repeated childhood patterns, feedback loops, things like that, not really knowing what anything was called. But I just started searching, because really what I got to the point was of just saying, this has got to get better.
Yeah.
And so I was online and I came across a video by a man named Brad Yates.
Okay.
And he was talking about a technique called EFT, or emotional freedom technique. And he had all these videos on YouTube, and he had a manual that that I could download for free with these scripts. And at first I just watched him. I had never heard of EFT, or tapping, that he called it tapping. And I just watched him and I was intrigued by it. And I read a little bit about it, and I saw that it really was not a new process. It was based on the principles of Chinese acupuncture, where you use your fingertips to tap on certain meridian points, and it releases trapped emotions in your physical and in your emotional body as well. Well, at that point, what did I have to lose? So I started tapping along with him, and I realized that afterward that I felt better. I first started just repeating whatever he would say, but then I realized things started coming up out of me organically. My own words. I was tapping to my own words, saying things that I had not ever said out loud. Releasing things that I had not ever been able to release, really things that had been trapped. And so when I realized that just after initially doing it, I felt different, I really said, okay, this is something that maybe I need to take a deeper dive into. And that became the modality I use to really accomplish the emotional freedom that I did get to.
Wow, that's great. So you can do it yourself. Is this a self therapy technique?
It is, and that was what was important to me. And the reason I wanted to emphasize that in the book is because, like many people, not just restored citizens, but many people, I didn't have a job at that time. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any insurance. I didn't have anything. So if I had needed any of those things to get help, I would have never gotten it. Yeah. The beauty of what EFT did for me, and there are many modalities that may work for other people, but the beauty of what EFT tapping did for me was that it allowed me to do this for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't need to leave home. I didn't need to have any clothes. I just sat in front of a computer, or some of it, I printed off the manual, the script that he had is called a big book of scripts. And I used to tape it up to the wall and just tap on the tapping points myself. And just by doing that, I was able to get so much freer. And the reason that was important to me was because I was so stuck in trauma that I couldn't make decisions that weren't traumatized. You know, I was limited to only being able to make the decisions that my traumatized mind would dictate, would allow me to make. I didn't have the freedom to make a different decision. So I was just recreating the same things because I was making the same choices, picking the same people, you know, with different faces and names, the same situation, the same job, just really stuck in this loop, really chained to my past by trauma. And EFT tapping was the first time I came across a tool that allowed me to break that chain. You know, reading the books and all of those things gave me the desire to break it, but didn't give me the means.
Yeah.
And so when I realized that what was missing was a means, that is what I used. And then because my pathway was so long and winding and circuitous, I wanted to write a book to show other people a shorter way.
Yes.
That you don't have, it doesn't have to take as long for you as it took for me. If you look and see what I did, your path can be shorter, and it doesn't have to be so many years of your life out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I've done EFT for many years myself, and I found it to be incredible. I've just found that it really does release stress, tension, limiting beliefs, trauma even.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is that I wrote the book because and included this section in it about tapping because, you know, I would have been considered among the so-called worst of the worst, right? Not a lot of second chance initiatives. They focus on people with nonviolent crimes. You know, nobody is really factoring into second chance initiative. You know, homicidal maniacs, right? You know, and so I wanted to say that even if someone would look at me, look at my case, look at my history, look at my childhood, and say this is an example of the worst of the worst, maybe this person doesn't even deserve help. You know, there's a way that you can help yourself even if somebody else doesn't think you deserve it. And
What would you recommend? I mean, if somebody is feeling like they need some help, but maybe they can't afford it, or maybe they don't know what to do, what would you recommend?
Well, as you and I know, I am really excited about an organization called the Black Tappers Union. And I would really encourage people to at least start there, get a referral for tapping, you know. And my thing is, if tapping doesn't work for you, it's definitely not going to hurt. But if it worked for me, I believe it could work for really, you know, almost anybody, because my experience with it has been that people say, oh, you know, well, we can help people with certain crimes, you know, but we can't help you. Well, my story, I can take it from here, is my story, but it's also in many ways the story of millions of people. There are millions of people who have gotten out or who are coming out, who in fact do have violent crimes, who in fact are going to be your neighbor. You know, they're going to be in the grocery store with you. And it is really in all of our best interest to ask, who are these people? How did they get there? And what do we do with them since they are out? Because to say, well, I don't think they should be out is really not an answer. They are out. I am out. And so aren't you glad that I'm out and better? And this is the message that I wanted to send in writing this book. I wanted to raise awareness, not just of the people coming out, because it's fine to do time and then come out and write a book about it, and that's great. But what would be even better is if we as a society recognized how to prevent crimes. Mm-hmm. Right? How to recognize trauma when it's standing in front of us, especially in our children, or really in anyone, but to be able to intercept that trauma before that person gets to the point where they explode on someone who actually was not even, that person is just paying the price for the sins of a lifetime of somebody else's pain, right? If we could really begin to identify that, start to have a conversation about how to prevent crime, using simple techniques that we know work, but they aren't being made accessible to the people who are most in need of it. I wrote about tapping, and I can take it from here, because if it had not been for tapping, I don't know where I would be today. It really was that significant to me. I had experienced years of childhood sexual abuse, rejection, emotional abuse, religious abuse, sibling abuse. I mean, I had really been through the ringer. And then at 19, I committed a violent crime and went to prison for 14 years. I don't really feel like there's a lot of people who can say, yeah, but you don't understand. I'm worse than you. It's not a competition, but I'm telling you, if tapping helped me, it could really help you. And so the point of I can take it from here is really to say that we need to start a different conversation. Trauma resolution is an integral part of making a better society. I feel like you make a better world by making better individuals. And so when I make myself better, I make my home better, I make my world better, and then I can influence other people to be better by showing them what I did, giving them a pathway. Again, I didn't want to just write a book to give people hope. I wanted to give people a step-by-step process. And that's what I can take it from here is all about.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's really obvious that you have come a long, long way. You're not the same person that you were when you were 19 or even when you just got out of prison.
That is true. But Joe, practically everybody released from prison has a trauma history. And that history, that trauma history, we need to understand is really key to this 60 to 70% recidivism rate that we're dealing with. And I'd like to ask people, if there was anything else that was being supported by your dollars, a plane, a car that had a 60 to 70% failure rate, would you still keep saying don't make any changes? We have a prison system that has a 60 to 70% recidivism rate. We need to do something different. And what, in my opinion, what I purport, and I can take it from here, that we need to do something that we need to do different is we need people to understand that personal reality is not a dirty word. Personal reality is not a conservative concept. To me, personal reality is the key to freedom. Because I had to understand that no matter what reentry program was out there for me, the only way that I could make sure that my past did not dictate my future was for me to confront my personal trauma history. Because people come out, and deservedly so. We work with them to give them jobs. We work with them to give them apartments. But I can give you an apartment, but can you keep it? I can give you a job, a house. I can give you what you need to re-enter. But if trauma is in control of your life, you can't keep it. And the point of I can take it from here is to not just get something to you, but get you to the point where you can keep it. Yeah. And where you don't need someone else to give it to you anymore, where you can say, I got it. Thank you for your help. I can take it from here. That's my mantra and my vision. Not to create, a revolving door of you going in and out, getting help, in and out, getting help, but to really create permanent change. If people read my story, they will understand that if someone from my background and someone with the severity of my case could really create permanent change, that I want my story to evoke the same feeling from them, that I can do that too.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, I think this is a good point for us to take some questions. And there have been some questions posed in the chat or in the question and answer that I was wondering if you could address those.
I'm happy to.
Okay, so the first one is an interesting one. How did you stay motivated to change and keep going while you were in prison?
Well, the motivate, the only real answer that I like to say that was grace. In having personal responsibility, I also like to acknowledge grace, because some things I can't say that came from me. On some fundamental level, Joe, I understood this is not who I am. I'm not a person who runs around killing people. Something happened to me that led to that, but that is not my identity. And I take responsibility for it, but I'm not going to accept that as who I am. And that feeling really that I know I can be better than this. I know this is not who I am. And wanting to prove that first to myself, but then also to the world. And then also, remember that when I went in, I had a 2-year-old. My daughter was 2 when I got arrested, and she was 16 when I came out. And so part of my motivation also was I wanted to come out and be a person that she could love, be a person that she could respect. I wanted to come out and be a person that she would understand and be proud of. And part of that also was the motivation that, I don't want her to come out and be like, I don't want anything to do with you. I was motivated by the desire to win her respect and also my own.
Sure. Well, that's interesting, because that leads us into the next question, which is, how does your daughter feel about the book? And can you talk about your relationship with your daughter after your 14-year incarceration?
So my daughter is, as I was writing the book, I sent her different drafts, and she has the final version now. So she's already aware of some of the stories, but she is now processing how everything comes together in the book. It's a challenge. It's not, I'm not going to say that everything's been rosy. A 14-year gap is a long time. And so the break was actually real, but I'm committed to, have been committed to over those years, reconnecting with her, getting for her to know me. But I've been honest with her about, what happened. And after all, it was her father, and she was only 2. And so we've had some hard, honest conversations about it. But, that is a situation that many people incarcerated are dealing with. I was fortunate in that my parents actually raised my daughter, but many people who are incarcerated, their children are taken from them by the state. And so, then they get all of these requirements on them to get their kids back, which they never get, which is an additional trauma on not only them, but also their children. So it's been a journey. For me and my daughter to rebond, we get to get to know each other. Period. After a 14-year gap, she grew up without me, but we're in the process of doing that. She supports the book. She knows that she can ask me anything, and she has her emotions about. She still has a gift that her father gave her from when she was a little girl, a baby, and so I have tried to be careful to not demonize her father, first of all, for her sake, and second of all, because it's not true. But to accept the personal responsibility and to just let her know what happened, and then to see how we can rebuild. But it's been a journey.
Yeah, I'm sure. So the next question is, how do you deal with memories of past events?
That's been a challenge. And EFT tapping is one of the ways that I deal with it. And, it's like peeling the layer of an onion. I go into the story in the book of how there was a point at which I thought I had resolved all of this. Because, when this first happened, James did not die immediately. He died the next day in the hospital. And so I was initially charged with aggravated battery. And so I did not even know he was dead until my first court date, when they had changed my charge from aggravated battery to murder. And so there's been a lot of that was my first instance. I remember saying out loud in my first court date, James died. That was how I learned it. So there's the process of, first of all, everybody pleads not guilty, right? So in the trial, there's the whole process of I didn't do anything. Then you have to come to terms with who you are and what you did. And, I had a 5-day jury trial, and it took the jury less than an hour to convict me. I had to deal with all of that anger, all of that resentment, all of that feeling like, nobody really understood what my part in it. And really realizing that there was a really real sentiment that actually, this isn't about you, just you anyway. It's, there is someone who is dead, who had a family. There is a daughter who doesn't have a father. And then, yes, there is you. So there were all these layers of coming to terms with what happened. And there were times when I thought, okay, I have resolved this, only to read something and realize that, oh my God, I'm crying and I'm wondering, like, what is wrong with me? How could I have done that? Or only to have a conversation or get an email from my daughter and realize this is totally not resolved. So, I've dealt with it by peeling away at that onion, but I am diligent about tapping, because I don't want those emotions that come up to get trapped again. And that's I don't want to. I want to confront it, Joe, confront it head on without being re-traumatized by it.
Right. I just got another question. Do you currently do EFT to help you get through on certain days?
Absolutely. I do EFT on a regular basis, because this is one of the points in the book as well. Trauma is not just about going to prison. Trauma is not just about childhood trauma. People are traumatized all around us. When we know people are traumatized when we look at the news, right? Many people were talking about how they were constantly getting re-traumatized every time they would watch and rewatch that George Floyd video, right? We're just constantly getting re-traumatized. And sometimes trauma is hooked to other emotions. You get angry about one thing, and the next thing you know, you're angry at the world. You get somebody at work does something to you, and then you come home and you're screaming at people who have nothing to do with what you're mad about. So part of that responsibility, that personal responsibility, that I believe is key to getting to the point where we can take it from here, is recognizing that I have to keep my own emotions free and clean. And when something is coming up, I have to be honest enough to confront it. Because I can't be saying, what society needs to confront if I'm not really confronting myself. We are the world, right? It's if it's not us, the society is just a collection of people. So I want to be one of those people who is willing to do the work. And so I do that work every day, and tapping is one of the tools I use to not get rehooked into resentment or into pain or into drama or trauma, because that's not who I choose to be.
Does it work?
It absolutely works. It absolutely works. The hardest part sometimes is recognizing that, wow, maybe I'm not as well as I thought I was, but life is a process, right? None of us are here to be completely well. Life is the process of recognizing that. And I try to stay clear. I try to stay that, I try to be the person that when I look in the mirror, I'm not looking at a lie. If something needs to be confronted, I'm not lying to myself about it. And that's why I don't lie about my crime. I don't lie and say I was defending myself. I don't lie and say I didn't do anything wrong, because that is just part of the trauma. The inability to really accept yourself for who you are. When you're well, you can accept who you are. You can. So my position is, I know what I did and I know why I did it. And that's, and I know who I am now. And if I keep those three things in place, I know what I did. And I'm not going to deceive you or myself about it. I also know why I did it.
Yeah.
And I know how to unhook myself from it so that I never do it again. And I'm going to show you how to get to the same place, whatever your trauma is. Doesn't have to be prison, doesn't have to be crime. Whatever your trauma is, you can use the same tool. I use it every day because it works.
Beautiful, beautiful. Another question. Can you talk more about the religious abuse you suffered and how you moved past it?
Yes. So my experience of religious abuse is that my mother was a Jehovah's Witness. And so there is a policy in there of what's called disfellowshipping or disassociating. And so when I decided as a teenager that I didn't want to be a witness anymore, and also, I had had my daughter, but even before that, I didn't want, so, the prohibition against fornication, I was disassociated. And what that meant was that nobody even the other witnesses in my family, which included siblings and parents, and, and everyone that I had grown up with had been witnesses, none of those people were allowed to talk to me. So I was completely ostracized. People would, see me coming on the street and cross the street. Siblings wouldn't talk to me. If I would get up in the morning and say good morning, nobody was even allowed to say good morning to me. Family can't speak to you, can't eat with you, can't associate with you. Well, this is devastating when you are still trying to form your identity. And it's not like you have outside resources, because having grown up in the religion, everybody I knew was in it. And so it was a really devastating thing to suddenly feel like I am a nobody. I am a ghost. I am not. And to be constantly told, Joe, that, the end of the world is imminent. And so there's no point in you getting a college education. I had graduated from high school when I was 15. And rather than being sent off to college, I was given a worker's permit and sent to work full time, because you're not going to need worldly knowledge. The end of the world is near. Since you're not a witness, you're not going to survive it. So imagine growing up as a child and being told basically on a daily basis that God could kill you any minute.
Wow.
Because you're not in this religion. It was really just devastating to my sense of being worth anything. What's the point if I'm not even good enough for God? And any minute now, Armageddon could start and I could be killed by God. What really is the value of my being around?
Yeah. So I have another question here that is really, I mean, I'm sure you could go on a little longer on this one, but this is a really good one. Do you think a young man who's currently incarcerated serving a similar long sentence can relate to this book? Especially because he's male and still young. He also entered prison when he was around 19 or 20.
Absolutely. I wrote it for especially, first and foremost, people who are incarcerated, and then people who are also out. Because if you can read this story before you get out, you can avoid many of the pitfalls that I fell in once I get out. And also you can start tapping while you're in there. Yeah. So it absolutely is a story that I think people who are currently incarcerated will no doubt see themselves in, as well as people who are already out. And then really, this is trauma. It's a story that many people will be able to look at and see their version of trauma in their life. It may not be incarceration, but it can help anybody in prison or out.
Right. Beautiful. Here's a personal question. Were you able to share your feelings with your mother about how you were treated by your family?
I did, and my mother did not believe most of what I said happened. She chose to, because most of what happened over a period of years. And she said she basically did not believe that something like that happened right under her nose, so to speak. And we had this conversation that it's not an indictment of you that these I was sexually abused right under your nose. That happens many times in cases of sexual abuse. It's not an indictment of you, but it is what happened. But she has made the choice to not believe me. So that just one more thing I have to tap through.
Yeah, I hear you. Last question. So this one is sort of a general societal question. Most of the perpetrators of mass shootings are young men aged 18 to 22 and are likely traumatized. Mm-hmm. How do we as a society get this group to do trauma work so as to prevent such crimes? Or how do we get people who've been traumatized to do the trauma work?
Well, first of all, they have to know about it. But then second of all, it has to be an integral part of the organizations that they turn to. So if it's not, if they go to reentry organizations, or they go to government organizations or state organizations and are asking for help, this type of work needs to be part of what they would automatically get. It also needs to go younger than that. It needs to be in the schools, where many of the young people are getting traumatized for the first time. So we need to make this something that is supported and provided by schools, by governments, by reentry organizations, so that if they are not aware of it when they arrive, it's a tool that's given to them, just like we give them a bus pass. We also give them this tool to get well and to not, continually be the next patron of the next reentry organization.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just about at the top of the hour, and I think that's probably a good place for us to call Chelsea back.
I really just wanted to emphasize in the book that, people in HR, people who need workers, we need to get people who have been formerly incarcerated into positions where they are actually able to work. We shouldn't just assume that people coming out of prison are all traumatized, all violent. None of them have done the work, and therefore they need to be relegated to jobs that are away from everybody else. I am a paralegal. I've been a law firm administrator, and I really am fighting for people who have also done the work, and who have also gotten every degree in the prison and everything else, to be able to rejoin the workforce and society at the level at which they are actually qualified. Give them a true second chance.
Yep.
Well, on behalf of everybody at Politics and Prose, I want to thank you both so much, Lisa and Joe, for this wonderful conversation. I know I speak for everybody in the audience. I wish we had more time to go over more details, but if you out there would like to purchase the book, I have dropped the link in the chat several times. It'll take you directly to the Politics and Prose website, where you can purchase the book. While you're there, you can also hop over to the events page and see what we have coming next. We'd love to see you all at another event. In the meantime, stay well, everyone, and well read. And thank you again to our wonderful speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.